Welcome to Mindfulness for the Soul, your daily dose of mental health insights, with your host, John Silamparis.
As you all know, the coronavirus situation is fierce and evolving. The spread of the virus has been alarmingly swift. As a result, the collective anxiety has inspired a remarkable sense of fear in our country and globally, the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time. The effects are also causing unprecedented social, political, and economic disruption. Why is that? Well, for many reasons. One reason is that we are still in the dark about the true nature of this virus and how dangerous it really is. For example, we know a lot about the influenza flu, but we don't know a lot about the coronavirus yet. Hence, the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know, as the saying goes. That's partially what's causing the scare. Remember, anxiety feeds and prospers on uncertainty, and nobody, including myself, likes uncertainty, especially the kind of uncertainty that puts our lives and the lives of loved ones at stake. Not knowing things freaks people out. It makes us feel out of control. It rattles our sense of safety and security so much that we panic, naturally. It's almost as if we are traumatized by what could be. Remember, intense fear causes human beings to shift into high gear survival mode status. Right now, this country is gripped by that potential trauma. We are paralyzed by what we call threat response or fight, flight, freeze response. The threat response is the adaptive function in the brain that has evolved over the millennia that keeps the human species alive. So, I think it's naive and borderline insensitive to tell someone who is panicking and in the throes of threat response mode to calm down and stop worrying so much. It's also hard to tell yourself that too, especially when we still don't know very much about how this pandemic is going to pan out. But there are suggestions to help us cope and manage the anxiety better as we traverse through this very frightening time. Here are some tips on how to manage your anxiety. Number one, monitor your emotional reasoning. This is very important. Emotional reasoning is when we are overwhelmed with so much fear that our emotions start reasoning for us. Emotional reasoning makes us believe feelings are facts, which we know they are not. Just because you feel scared about the coronavirus doesn't necessarily mean that you are in danger. Emotional reasoning makes you evaluate things and situations based on your emotions and subsequent reactivity to the stressor. That's the threat response working. That's the threat response working well. So, whenever you feel anxious and you feel anxiety spike over this situation, try to pull back from the situation, and before you speak or act, take a moment and pause to reconstitute yourself. Don't allow your emotional dysregulation to override your reasoning. As you are taking this moment, make sure that your anxiety is in proportion to what is really going on. In many ways, the hysteria about coronavirus is outpacing the reality of the situation. Please remember that. Number two, focus on things you do have control over. Planning ahead is very important here. However, I say this with caution because planning ahead does not mean losing your perspective and going crazy with overbuying and overspending. If your business or workplace has not temporarily shut down, ask your employer about a work from home option. Be prepared for disruptions such as school closings and events that you have planned to be postponed or canceled. Have contingency plans for safety and sustainability, like having plenty of food and medical supplies, prescriptions, etc. If the crisis goes on longer than expected, try to identify trusted sources of information you can turn to for news. Then you can at least say that you've done everything you possibly can to keep you and your family safe and ready. And speaking of information, here's number three. Try to limit exposure to the news. It's important to stay updated to everything that's going on during the crisis, and we are seeing it constantly changing by the hour, but you don't need to obsess over the news. Sometimes too much news can saturate us and hence overwhelm us. It can make us feel more helpless. And sometimes, this is important, news reports we hear can be appropriately sensationalized for the purposes of emphasis and to promote safety. Hyperbole and the natural inflation of the danger threat is exercised for a reason. It is not meant to be dishonest, and we need to hear all the facts, but sometimes too many facts and the intensity of these facts are not beneficial during times like these. Number 4, try to maintain a sense of normalcy. Again, routines and activities might be temporarily disrupted, but go about your day as you normally would. Try to keep the structure and the consistencies of your life the same for you and your family, even though you might be indoors more often in the next few weeks. The more normalcy you keep, the less you will be focused on the potential threats. Try to stay busy and keep your mind active. Try to avoid too much idle time. Too much idle time could cause you to over-magnify the situation and increase anxiety. Number 5, make sure you know the facts about how the coronavirus is transmitted. Remember, you can't sterilize your entire environment, but taking a few preventative actions will help reduce your risk and hopefully relieve your anxiety. Here are some important facts straight from US News and World Report. I quote, "Coronavirus is transmitted from person to person via respiratory droplets. When an infected person sneezes or coughs, droplets containing virus particles are released. If you are standing close, you can become infected. Droplets can land on surfaces such as elevator buttons, doorknobs, and shared workspaces. If you touch a contaminated surface, then touch your face, you can become infected. The virus can enter your body through your eyes and nose or mouth. So to prevent contamination, proper hand washing is your best defense against the virus." End quote. Therefore, I say, make friends with the elbow bump or the foot or leg tap and start protecting yourself. Number 6, acknowledge the anxiety. Seriously, acknowledge and temporarily accept that uncertainty and the fear of uncertainty about the virus is what scares you the most, not necessarily the virus itself. So I'm going to repeat that. Acknowledge and temporarily accept that uncertainty and the fear of uncertainty about the virus is what scares you the most, not necessarily the virus itself. Acknowledge that it's natural for you to go into a threat response based on the collective scare. It's expected of you to feel this way and very typical. It means your built-in survival system is working properly. The work for us now is to get through this as best we can. Our job is to reactivate our executive brain and think rationally during this crisis instead of irrationally. It's also important for us to contribute together to slowing the spread of the coronavirus. To help prevent the virus from spreading even further, as mentioned, please wash hands frequently and thoroughly. Stay home from work or school if you are feeling ill. Keep extra food and medical supplies around, and practice social distancing from all people, not just people that may be feeling sick. There's nothing wrong with that. Try to practice that. Lastly, remember, reducing stress has other benefits too. Listen to this. Obviously, reducing stress is better for you and for all of us as we collectively learn to manage our anxiety. But what's important to know is that the more you stress, the more susceptible you can become to viruses, because stress can negatively affect your immune system. When we are anxious, cortisol, the stress hormone, and other hormones are increased in the brain. Cortisol suppresses your immune system, so if you are more rational and you can learn to regulate your emotions better, the safer you will be. In short, the more anxious you are, the more vulnerable you are to illness, such as coronavirus. So it behooves us to pump the brakes and try our best to calm down and be patient. So again, try to pump the brakes and try your best to calm down and be patient with this process. Thanks again for tuning into our podcast. I hope you found this information helpful. If you have any questions about coping with coronavirus anxiety, feel free to email me at jsillamparis@gmail.com. Hang in there, everyone. This too shall pass. Yes, even this shall pass. I'm John Sillamparis, MFT.